Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. As always, I'm so happy to be back here again with a new episode. And if you are new here, hello and welcome. Why don't you stick around to see what kind of shocking true crime story I have for you today. And also please do subscribe to the channel for more true crime content. Alright, I hope you guys are good and that your day's been good to you so far. And for this week's case, I'm going to be covering the kind of case I haven't covered in quite a while on my channel. And that is a serial killer case. And this case was also recommended to me by one of my amazing subscribers, Danny. So Danny, thank you so much for bringing this case to my attention. And like I said in the previous episode, if any of you have any case recommendations for me, please just mention them down in the comments, or if you want, you could message me on Facebook. I will leave a link to my Facebook account in the description box. That being said, in this case, I will be talking about murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault. So viewer discretion is advised. But sit back, relax, and let me tell you all about the terrifying story of Robert Hansen. On February 15th in 1939, Robert Christian Bose Hansen was born at the Coleman Hospital in Estherville, Iowa, and he was the first son of an American woman named Edna Margaret Peterson and a Danish man named Christian Hansen. And in 1942, the family moved to Richmond, California, but then 7 years later, they ended up coming back to Iowa, and when they got back to Iowa, this time they settled in Pocahontas. Before passing away in 1983, Christian Hansen owned a bakery, and his son Robert was also an employee at this bakery. And as a young person, Robert was described as a shy child who also suffered from a stutter, and he also had some very bad acne, which left him permanently scarred. And because of these certain qualities of his, he wasn't really getting much attention from the girls in school and in town, and for that reason he started having a lot of hatred for them, and he also started having some very dark revenge fantasies about them. And throughout his childhood and much of his adolescence, Robert was described as a quiet kid and was a bit of a loner as well. And his relationship with his father didn't really make life easier for him as well, because it was said that his father was quite domineering towards him. Robert started practicing archery and hunting at a very young age, and he actually found some solace in these hobbies of his. And then in 1957, he enlisted in the United States Army Reserve, and he served for a year before getting discharged. Then after the army, he started working as an assistant drill constructor at a police academy in Pocahontas, Iowa. And this is where he developed a relationship with a younger woman whom he ended up marrying in the summer of 1960. Alright, now at this point, we all know that these kind of guys, before they get to the messed up part of their lives where they're killing people, they first start with a lot of early crimes in their lives. And this guy is no different. Because on December 7th in 1960, Robert was arrested for burning down a Pocahontas County Board of Education school bus garage, and he did this just to get revenge for not being popular in high school. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but he only served a few months before getting released from the Anamosa State Penitentiary. During his time at the penitentiary, Robert was diagnosed with manic depression with periodic schizophrenic episodes, and the psychiatrist who made this diagnosis also noted that he also had an infantile personality, and this basically meant that he lacked developmental progress and he would clinically present himself as functioning as a child. And another note that was made about him was that he was obsessed with getting revenge on the people he felt wronged him in his life, and while he was in prison, his wife also filed for divorce. Then over the next few years after getting released, he would also be arrested again from time to time for petty theft. Then in 1967, he moved to Anchorage, Alaska, and by this time he already had a second wife that he married back in 1963, and they already had 2 kids together in Anchorage. And Robert was actually well liked by his neighbors, and since he had a skill in hunting, he would also go on to set a couple of local hunting records. But even though he already had a criminal record, this guy just couldn't help himself. Because in December of 1971, he was arrested twice. First, for kidnapping and attempting to sexually violate an unidentified housewife. And then secondly, for sexually assaulting an unidentified sex worker. Robert pleaded no contest to the charge of assault with a deadly weapon when it came to the case of the unidentified housewife. But when it came to the case of the sex worker, the rape charge was dropped due to a plea deal that was made. Robert was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and after having served 6 months of his sentence, he was put on a work release program, and he was released to a halfway house, which is an institute for people with criminal records so that they can learn or relearn some useful skills that are going to help them reintegrate back into society and also be able to take care of themselves and support themselves. However, in 1976, Robert was caught again, but this time he was caught trying to steal a chainsaw from an Anchorage Fred Meyer store. So he was caught and charged with larceny, and he pleaded guilty to the charge. For this, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and he requested that he receive treatment for his bipolar disorder. But the Alaska Supreme Court ended up reducing his sentence, and he was released with time served. Now, it's believed that Robert Hansen started killing his victims in 1972, and the way he would operate is that he would go and try to find a sex worker, and then he would try to get her in his car, and the moment she gets inside his car, he would then hold her at gunpoint, and then he would drive to his home. Then when they get to his house, he would then sexually assault her, and then once he's done, he would put her in his plane, and then they would fly to an isolated area where he would hunt her as if she was some sort of prey. It's also believed that Robert's first victim was 18-year-old Celia Beth Van Zanten. Celia was kidnapped on December 22nd in 1971, and she was found frozen to death after escaping from her kidnapper. Her body was found on December 25th, and her abduction occurred 3 days after Robert assaulted a prostitute and 4 days before the prostitute got him arrested. And even though there are similarities between Celia's abduction and the modus operandi of Robert's, there isn't any conclusive evidence to suggest that he was the one who committed the crime, and even he denied being the one who killed this young lady. Then on July 7th in 1973, 17-year-old Megan Emmerich went missing, and even though it wasn't really stated when she was killed or when she was found dead, it is believed that Robert Hansen is the one who was responsible for her death. However, Robert denied killing Megan, but investigators still suspect him as the killer. Another murder he was suspected of was the murder of 22-year-old Mary Kathleen Thill, who went missing around July 5th in 1975, but he also denied being the one who killed her. Then after this, a series of more bodies were being discovered in and around Anchorage and the Matanuska-Susitna Valley area. The first body was discovered by some construction workers near the Eklutna Road on July 21st in 1980. And since the body could not be identified, it was given the name of Eklutna Annie by investigators. And she was between 16 and 25 years of age. It was believed that she was killed between November of 1979 and June of 1980 before she was found in July of 1980. She had been stabbed in the back, and by the time her body was found, the body had already been partially eaten by wild animals. Then later that month, the body of Joanna Messina was also discovered in a gravel pit near Seward in late July of 1980. And then on September 12th in 1982, investigators also found the remains of 23-year-old Sherry Morrow in a shallow grave near the Nick River. She had been shot in the back, but her clothes had no bullet holes, which suggested that she was shot while she was naked, and then she was redressed after she was killed before she was buried. Then on June 13th in 1983, Robert Hansen came across a young girl by the name of Cindy Paulson, and he offered her $200 if she performed oral sex on him. Cindy agreed to this, but as soon as she got into his car, he pulled out a gun on her, and then he drove to his house in Muldoon. Then when they got there, he held her captive, sexually assaulted her, and then started torturing her. Cindy later told the police that after Robert chained her by the neck to a post in his house basement, he took a nap on the couch. Then when he woke up, they got into his car and they drove to the Merrill Field Airport. And this is where he told her that he intended to take her out to his cabin that's in an area only accessible by plane or boat. And this cabin of his is in the Nick River area of the Matanuska-Susitna Valley. Cindy was crouched in the back seat of his car with her wrists bound in front of her body when she saw an opportunity to escape. And this was when Robert was busy unloading the cockpit of his plane, so while his back was turned, Cindy crawled out of the car and ran to nearby 6th Avenue. Then once she told the police what happened to her, she also told them that she left her sneakers in the back seat of his car as evidence that she was indeed kidnapped by Robert Hansen. And when she escaped, Robert was actually chasing after her, but luckily she managed to get to 6th Avenue and flag down a passing truck. The truck driver saw the state that she was in, and so he stopped, and then she got in as fast as possible, and then they drove away. The truck stopped at the Mush Inn, and that's where she decided to jump out, and then she ran inside to try to plead with the clerk of the inn so she can use their phone to contact her boyfriend who was at the Big Timber Motel. Now, even though the truck driver left, he decided to make a call to the police about a young girl who was barefoot and in handcuffs. So the Anchorage police ended up going to the Mush Inn, but when they got there, they were told that Cindy had left and she went to the Big Timber Motel where she said her boyfriend was. Then when they got to the Big Timber Motel, they found her in room 110, and she still had those handcuffs on her, but she was alone in the room. She had no one else with her in the room. They took her to the Anchorage Police Department headquarters, and this is where she described her killer as Robert Hansen. Then when the police went over to Hansen to question him about this, obviously he denied everything. And he said that Cindy was actually the one who was causing trouble for him because he wouldn't pay her extortion demands. And even though this man had previous convictions, the police actually took his side because of his meek demeanor and his humble occupation as a baker. And also somehow he managed to get one of his friends to create an alibi for him so he wouldn't be seen as a serious suspect. Then on September 2nd in 1983, the body of Paula Golding was also found, and just like Sherry Morrow, she was also found in a shallow grave in the Nick River area. She had also been shot in the back, but her clothes didn't have any bullet holes in them, which again suggested that she could have been shot while she was naked and then redressed before she got buried. Then after this, 6 more bodies were found in April of 1984, 5 of which were found within a span of 5 days between April 24th and April 29th. And these were the bodies of Malai Larson, Teresa Watson, Angela Ferron, and Tamira Peterson, as well as the body of Sue Luna. Sue Luna was forced to strip naked and then run through the forest while being hunted like some sort of prey, and she was found shot to death. Within 5 days, 5 bodies. Within 5 days. Now that's just insane. Then the 6th body that was found was that of Robin Pelkey, and it's not really confirmed when she was found in April. However, her identity was discovered using forensic genealogy in October of 2021. Before this, she was nicknamed the Horseshoe Harriet. The investigators of these cases ended up contacting an FBI agent by the name of John Douglas, and they needed John Douglas to help them build a profile of the killer based on the bodies that were found. But they focused specifically on the bodies of Eklutna Annie, Joanna Messina, and Sherry Morrow. So the profile was built based on those 3 bodies. So the profile that John Douglas built goes like this. He believed that the killer might be an experienced hunter with low self-esteem, also has a history of being rejected by women, and could have a compulsion to keep souvenirs of his murders, such as the victim's jewelry. He also suggested that the man they're looking for might be having a stutter. So the investigators used this profile, and they investigated every possible suspect until they came to one who fit the profile to a T. They came across Robert Hansen, and on top of that, Robert also owned a plane, meaning he could have had access to the area where the bodies were found, since it was only accessible by plane or boat. And when the investigators looked at this profile and also considered the testimony they got from Cindy Paulson about Robert Hansen, they secured a search warrant for his car, his plane, and also his house. And they actually found jewelry belonging to some of the missing women in his house. And also they found an array of firearms in the corner hideaway of his attic. Another thing that was found was an aeronautical chart with 37 little X marks on it. And these marks were placed where the bodies of the missing women were found. So now that there was evidence, there was obvious evidence against him, the police confronted him with all this evidence, but he tried as much as he possibly could to deny everything. Eventually, at some point, he tried to turn the blame onto these women, and he tried to justify his actions. But eventually, he did end up confessing to the evidence that was collected against him, and he did confess that he went on a killing spree, an attack spree against Alaskan women starting in 1971. This man's earliest victims were young women between the ages of 16 and 19. But these young women were not sex workers like his earlier victims, which led to his discovery. Once he was arrested, Robert was charged with assault, kidnapping, and multiple weapon offenses and theft. And when the police came again with evidence that showed a match between his rifle and the bullets that were found at the crime scene, he took a plea deal. He pled guilty to 4 homicides that the police had evidence for, and these were the murders of Sherry Morrow, Joanne Messina, Paula Golding, and the woman dubbed Eklutna Annie. He also agreed to give out details of his other victims in return for being allowed to serve a sentence in a federal prison, and also for not having any publicity in the press. Another condition for his plea bargain was that he had to help decipher the X markings on his aviation map, because they had information on where the other victims' bodies were. Robert also confirmed the investigators' theory about how these victims were abducted. He also said that he would let his other victims go if they promised not to report him to the police. Robert showed investigators 17 grave sites in and around the area of South Central Alaska, and 12 of these bodies were not even known about. But he didn't really give out the location of all the bodies he buried, because on his aviation map there are 3 location markings, and these are in Resurrection Bay near Seaward. And since he denied killing Mary Thill and Megan Emmerich, investigators suspect that 2 of these grave sites are of their bodies. At the end, 12 out of a probable 21 victims' bodies were exhumed and returned to their families. Robert Hansen was sentenced to 461 years in prison without the possibility of parole. At first, he was imprisoned at the United States Penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Then in 1988, he was taken back to Alaska and was briefly incarcerated at the Lemon Creek Correctional Center in Juneau. He was also imprisoned at the Spring Creek Correctional Center in Seaward until in May of 2014, when he was taken to the Anchorage Correctional Complex for health reasons. Robert Hansen died on August 21st in 2014, and he was 75 years old. He died at the Alaska Regional Hospital in Anchorage under natural causes from various health issues. This man had some serious issues, and one of the things that bother me about these kind of killers is that you could never really know how many people they truly killed, because a lot of them, if not all of them, refused to share the information about the locations of all of their victims. Just like how Robert also refused to talk about all of his missing victims. So do you think he could have killed more women that were never found? Be sure to let me know about that in the comments. But yeah guys, this was the messed up and terrifying story of Robert Hansen. I sincerely hope that all of his victims are resting in peace, and I send out my deepest sympathies to their families. They did not deserve any of this. So that is all that I have for you guys on this case. Please do let me know what you think about it in the comments. And also, if you enjoyed watching, please do me a big favor and leave a thumbs up for the video so my channel could reach out to more people. I would seriously appreciate that. And thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. As always, I do appreciate you taking time out of your day to support my channel. And again, if you are new here, please be part of the family and subscribe to the channel for more true crime content. That being said, I will see you guys in the next video. So until then, take care of yourselves, enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.